Hello, I'm Thick Manatee. I love to discuss all the things I'm passionate about. Movies, video games, and television, which is what this video will be covering. Today, just like in my last video, I'm going to be talking about a project from a group of creatives that have left a massive impact on me and my life. There's a saying typically used online when discussing creatives. He can't miss. She can't miss. They can't miss. You get it. This means that the main creative force behind certain projects is so talented and so singular that they cannot make something that's poorly received. Hideo Kojima, Hayao Miyazaki, Hidetaka Miyazaki, Guillermo del Toro, Denis Villeneuve, Christopher Nolan. The list can go on and on. However, even these giants have made some things that stumbled or didn't connect with audiences. They missed. However, in my opinion, there's one man who cannot miss: Vince Gilligan. This man does not miss. Every single thing he does is a hit, including the topic of today's video. Pluribus is the newest creation of the legendary Vince Gilligan. You may have heard of some of his other works, little shows named Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Just two tiny masterpieces that are considered some of the greatest television shows of all time, probably even some of the greatest pieces of entertainment ever. You know, no biggie. And now he has left his comfort zone that he has been in for more than a decade and gone back to his roots. Vince originally worked on The X-Files, a famous sci-fi show, and he wanted to rekindle some of that specific creativity since the Breaking Bad universe was quite grounded. Well, mostly. And so he created a brand new, unique sci-fi series with Pluribus. And thankfully, Pluribus has the automatic advantage of Vince being at the helm, a man who has had years and years of experience honing his craft and realizing his visions. And alongside him is the true face of this story, another individual who has honed their craft to an absurd level. That would be the lead actress, Rhea Seehorn. Rhea played the character of Kim Wexler in Better Call Saul, and she grew exponentially over the course of that series. Everyone could see how extremely talented she was, including Vince Gilligan, who said that very early on in the making of the show, he changed his original concept for Pluribus to better suit Rhea Seehorn. He wrote this show specifically for her, and together, along with the rest of the cast and crew, these folks have created something truly fascinating. At the very core, this story is still a rather simple one, but the plethora of ideas and concepts that stem from almost every moment of this show are astounding. There's a lot this show can be about. There's a lot this show tackles and covers in this singular season of 9 episodes, and today I'm going to do my best to cover as much as I can to hopefully convey to you why the show is so incredible and how I think it will join its legendary predecessors in the future. I also want to speak on the comments that some people have made about this series being slow and boring, because I can see how some people might think that, but the reality is far from that. I'll be talking about full spoilers throughout, and to keep this video a bit more focused, I'm going to split it up into sections. First, I'll discuss the story, then the characters who are the backbone of this show. I'll then go into some things outside of the series that I researched, such as the rigorous production which allowed this world to even exist. And lastly, I'll discuss the legacy of Pluribus, how it holds up to Gilligan's last 2 shows, and where I think it could go in the next seasons. So with that, I think it's time.
It's Pluribin time!
Pluribus is set in a world where each and every individual on the planet is happy, mostly. This is thanks to an event that joined all 7 billion human beings into one collective hive mind. These people, now known as the Others, have changed the world forever. They feel nothing but joy and happiness, so there is no longer any kind of crime or poverty or general negatives for humanity. Pretty good, right? Well, there are of course some conditions. First, there are a few people who still retain their individuality, 13 of them throughout the entire world. And individuality is the main condition of this new unified world. Individuals are no longer a thing. Every person on planet Earth is now basically the exact same. They now contain the collective knowledge of the entire population, and they still have the unique parts of the individuals they inhabit, but they see no reason to express them. They will never create new art, share emotions with one another, aside from bliss, and will never really move on in the future. They have no aspirations, no goals, aside from their biological imperative, which is adding the remaining survivors to their collective and then spreading this connection throughout the rest of the galaxy. Yeah, they aren't stopping with Earth. They have goals of leaving our planet and having other beings join this hive mind. This intricately crafted world leads to both thematic sides that make up Pluribus. On one hand, you get the incredibly fascinating elements of this sci-fi world. What really caused this joining? Is adding more people to the collective the only true goal of the others? Can this actually be reversed, or is everyone stuck like this until they die? So many intriguing ideas stem from this core concept alone. However, you also get the things that some people might find slow and boring. The majority of this story isn't really focused on the others. It's focused on our protagonist and her inner conflicts, and I guess her outer conflicts too. The focus of this story is on Carol's rationalization of this whole occurrence and what she plans to do, or not do about it. And this leads to a lot of scenes that are in fact very slow and methodical. A ton of moments where Carol is grappling with this new reality, reflecting on her life choices before the joining, or struggling with the feelings of saving the world and putting it right, while simultaneously just wanting to rest and not have to worry about the literal entire world's fate. And because this is a series from Vince Gilligan and his fellow writers, these introspective scenes often have little to no dialogue, which some people might consider too slow or even boring. Now, I get it, attention span is pretty low these days. Despite that, you have to make some time for things that make you use your brain. Well, I guess you don't have to. I'm not your dad. Go use ChatGPT and turn your brain into a fine mush if you really don't want to think too hard about life. But realistically, if you're a relatively well-adjusted human being, then something in your life should make you think. It's good to get away from the Netflix exposition slop and occasionally ponder things. Consider what characters could be thinking without them directly reciting their feelings. Think about how this story could go, what paths it could take. Why are these scenes that are boring making you feel that way? Maybe you should fill in some of the blanks left here and imagine how Carol could possibly be feeling in this life-altering post-apocalyptic emotionless void of an existence. These questions are kind of inherently asked with Pluribus, so if you're just waiting for something to happen, you might need to stop waiting for a big explosion or freaky sci-fi moment and just follow Carol along her journey to see where she's coming from and where she might be headed. And with that said, this feels like a good time to get into more specific details about the characters, because they are the real driving force of this entire story. The characters in this series are actually quite simple. You have Carol Sturka, our protagonist, who is very flawed and reluctant, but provides us with a more personal view into this peaceful yet frightening world. We also have the others, the entire population of Earth, who are now all part of one hive mind, and are prominently seen through the lens of Zosha, Carol's chaperone. You have Manusos Oviedo, a man who is not one of them and wishes to save the world. And lastly, you have the other survivors, such as Mr. Diabate, who is the most developed of the 12. However, none of them are super important to this first season. Our primary viewpoint of this world comes from Carol Sturka. She is a writer of harmless fantasy romance books that she actually enjoys writing, but not thinking too deeply about. According to Rhea Seehorn, Carol felt a bit of self-loathing whenever she thought about her books and how they represented her to the rest of the world, both as an author and as a person. She often would talk bad about her own work because she didn't want anyone else beating her to the punch. Carol felt that she wasn't good enough as an author yet, or didn't have a high enough place on the best-selling author lists, so she shouldn't be viewing her stories as valuable. This and other aspects of her life led her to kind of overcorrect and do things in the hardest way possible. She would often drink a lot, and she had a history of drug usage. She likes loud music and harshly expressing her feelings, and this is how she acted before the world fell apart. Carol now has to reconcile with her new reality, and she's not entirely capable of doing so. And unfortunately for her, the world itself is now affected by her feelings just as much as she is. She participated in a lot of self-loathing, but that spread outwardly as the others came along, took away her wife, her career, and the life she had known. So now she has to vent those frustrations somehow, and for her that resulted in backlash. Loud fits of rage directed at the others specifically. However, they can't handle that for some reason. Those negative emotions physically affect them all at once and cause them to freeze up. And since all of humanity across the world is connected as one and are constantly doing different things like driving or flying, accidents are bound to happen if they all simultaneously lose control. So Carol is shown to be a person who does things in difficult ways because of her personal feelings or feelings toward a specific situation. And now that specific situation involves the entire planet. and if she lashes out, it directly affects them and can result in deaths around the globe. Long story short, Carol isn't a simple and automatically heroic, strong female protagonist. Just like Vince Gilligan's other series, the main character is a deeply flawed individual who thinks that they're doing a lot better than they actually are. And unlike our previous two straight male protagonists, we now have a middle-aged lesbian who has a lot of heated opinions about various things. So of course, the people who watched Breaking Bad and thought Skyler was a terribly written character are gonna love Carol. No. In reality, a lot of people who watched this series began to call her things such as dull, stubborn, and annoying. And I mean, can you blame them? All the women in these shows are like that. Why did Skyler have to be such a bitch all the time? Couldn't she see that Walt was just trying to provide for the family? Why couldn't she just leave him alone and let him melt bodies, run over people with a car, let a woman choke to death on her own vomit, poison a child, bomb a nursing home, have 10 people murdered in the span of 2 minutes, hand his son-like figure over to literal Nazis? If people couldn't handle that from a supporting character, then it's no wonder they hate how bitchy the protagonist is in comparison. And yeah, she is a lot more of an aggressive character than someone like Skyler or Kim, but it feels pretty warranted, all things considered. Skyler was dealing with a very traumatizing and stressful personal issue. Carol is dealing with a worldwide dilemma, one that could cause the entire human race to go extinct. I think she should be allowed to have an outburst or two. And on top of her being a Karen, she's also gay. Carol's sexuality plays an important role in this story. And yeah, just like her being annoying, some people also have an issue that she's a lesbian. But personally, I'd prefer to see this added element to a Vince Gilligan character. We technically had a gay character with Gus Fring previously, but the only time that ever really mattered to the story was when we saw his tragic origins and when we saw him not getting involved with a guy because of his lifestyle. Those moments were very interesting, but sorely underdeveloped. Carol had a wife who then unfortunately died, and Carol buried her with a beautiful memorial in their own backyard. Before she died, the others absorbed her memories and decided to send a woman who looked like Carol's subconscious dream woman. Carol then calls her so goddamn fuckable, clings to her for dear life when she returns after a month apart, and then Carol chooses to start some strange love affair with this woman simply because she'd rather forget about the realities of her situation and go on cute dates with her pirate girlfriend chaperone, who also happens to be the entire planet. Yeah, her being a lesbian is kind of important to her character. This is most certainly not pandering. And the actual biggest example for that comes from this very important conversation that Carol has with Zosha about Camp Freedom Falls. This camp was a conversion camp, a place where these disillusioned individuals tried to change who these queer kids truly were. And unfortunately, Carol was sent there as a teenager, by her own mother of all people. One of the few people in the entire world who was supposed to treat Carol with unconditional love sent her to a place that changed her life and probably caused a lot of those self-loathing issues. And these feelings came back up around the others' arrival because Carol said they reminded her of the counselors at the camp. People who would smile all the time and hide their true feelings and intentions behind honeyed words. Carol's sexuality is rooted into her character as much as her prickly attitude. She grew up and went through life in a certain way, and now that the whole world has changed, possibly forever, she can't shove those feelings down any longer. And displaying these emotions is something that Rhea Seehorn does a phenomenal job of in this series. Rhea Seehorn is one of the great actors of our age. You may not have seen her performances before or might have only seen her in Better Call Saul. If that's all you've seen her in, then you should consider yourself lucky because, in my opinion, it's one of the greatest performances in TV history. That was the first time I ever saw her acting, and as the show went on, I noticed her growing talent. She was always very good from the start, but she grew right alongside her character. And there was one moment in particular that made me do one of these, the scene on the bus. If you haven't seen the series, I won't spoil it, but this is the second to last episode in the whole show, and Kim is reconciling with basically everything that happened over the course of the series. Every event that has occurred is coming back all at once in this very moment, and she can't help but break down. And Rhea Seehorn used this wonderfully written scene and character to her advantage. She combined all the moments that her and Kim shared and put them all out on display. This was the moment where I had to take myself out of the moment and think, oh, wait a second, she's not just an actor, she's an artist. While most of us recognized her brilliance, well, not any single award show, Vince Gilligan recognized this much earlier on in the show's lifespan. And he mentioned that he originally planned to make this initial idea that would become Pluribus into a story about a man, because he had always written male protagonists and he's a man, so it came more naturally to him. But once he saw how astounding Rhea Seehorn was, he had to pivot his ideas and craft Pluribus specifically for her. Yeah, this story is made directly for Rhea Seehorn. No one else was ever considered because this is her series. So that's why I felt I needed to spend so much time talking about Carol and how Rhea expertly brought her to life. She does a phenomenal job of balancing Carol's anger, her overindulgent nature, and her crushing loneliness. Carol is all alone in her house, in her city, her country, and in some ways, almost completely alone in the world. She has every right to be angry about her lack of autonomy in this situation, the lack of understanding from her fellow survivors, and her lack of true love and care. And Rhea shows this through her expressions as Carol, from the outright hostility that is clear, to the subtle, vacant looks of dread and despair that are too painful to bring to the surface. I could probably make this video entirely about Carol, and I will be talking about her character plenty more, but I think now is a good time to move on to some other characters. Which is interesting because these other characters do have unique things about them, but they all relate back to Carol in some way. The others want to please her as well as have her join them. The remaining survivors don't want her to be involved with their conversations and meetings. And Manusos's end goal for the season is to join up with Carol so they can help one another. Let's start talking about these supporting characters by discussing the most important one. Or ones? The others are a character all their own, and they are primarily seen as a singular entity through Zosha. Zosha is our direct viewpoint into the inner workings of the others, and her contribution to the story is quite a complicated one. Zosha is seemingly an individual that truly cares for Carol and wants the best for her both emotionally and physically. But at the end of the day, Zosha is simultaneously the entire world. They can't give their full undivided attention to Carol no matter how much she might want it. They have big plans, such as their biological imperative. Their goal of turning Carol and the remaining survivors into them is the same as breathing or eating for them. They need to have the survivors join or else they have no other real purpose. So it's tough for both the audience and Carol when we think that Zosha is starting to form a genuine connection with her because we know it's too good to be true. And this also plays into Carol's development. At this point, when she and Zosha develop a romantic relationship, we can see that she is just trying to find whatever happiness she can in this new world. She doesn't want to think about saving the world and fixing this human race altering issue. She just wants to be at peace. And that's something that Zosha and the others actually want to give her. Peace. One of the most interesting moments that comes out of this first season is the other half of that Camp Freedom Falls conversation. Carol letting Zosha know how traumatic it was to feel like she was being forced to change gives us a lot of insight into her experiences. But after that, Zosha says something that you can't outright deny. She says that just like Carol didn't want her sexuality to be forcibly changed, the others don't want to be forced back to the way things were. The hive mind has felt what it's like to be a human being, how good things can be, but also how much suffering there can be. They have been humans before, so they know what it's like. But Carol has never been one of them. So how would she know she doesn't like the connection if she doesn't try it? And this connection between the others is both fascinating and haunting. They're able to communicate non-verbally. They are aware of everything that happens to them, even if they don't feel the same things that each individual feels. And they are able to achieve great things if they all work together, which is perfectly natural for them. However, a big downside is them not being able to feed themselves aside from pre-existing foods and dead human beings, which is pretty problematic. They want to spread their gift, but without consistent sustenance, they will all die before they can even make it past our planet. And the biggest detriment to this joining is the most obvious thing. There are no longer individuals. 7 billion people are all joined, and there is no crime or hate or division, but at the same time, there is no individuality, no unique personalities, no art, no culture. They find no interest in those things because they are already content. They see no reason to create something because they have no desire to make something that no one has ever made. They said that Carol's books are on the same level as William Shakespeare's, and they love her just the same way they love Manusos and the other survivors. They believe that everything that already exists is enough, and the only thing that matters is bringing their unique connection to those who don't have it. And this is one of the most important questions that arises from the show. What happens when everyone has been joined? When everyone is theoretically a part of the hive mind, there will be no more humanity left. As we see with Kusimayu, the others have the Peruvian culture and human elements within them, but once Kusimayu is no longer there, they forget about those things. They were only pretending to have any interest or passion about those things for her sake. So if everyone joined them, then human beings would just be one entity, essentially. This actually made me think of a great comparison from a little game called Destiny 2.
I promised before that this was the most rewarding public event. And there we have two chests.
Okay, wait. Before you dislike the video and click off, just hear me out. In Destiny 2, a lot of stuff happens that I'm not going to explain. Go watch Bife for that. But there is a being who is one of the big bads of the franchise. This being is called the Witness, and the Witness might look like a person, but it is revealed to actually be the entirety of an alien species that formed into one singular being. The Witness wanted to create the final shape, which was essentially an act of turning everything in the galaxy into a sculpture. Everything would be frozen and remain the same forever. And when I think about that, I could imagine Pluribus somehow ending up in a similar way if something isn't done. The others could have the remaining survivors join them, and then they will all be one. They will all be content. But then what? Then they just stagnate. Are they just going to stand around like statues? Or lay down in their communal beds forever? They can't feed themselves, so eventually they'll all just wither away and die. It's not even like the final shape where everything will be preserved for eternity. The others will only last for a few years, months, or maybe weeks. They'll be happy and filled with bliss, but even that will eventually end. Then all the culture and history and memories of this entire civilization will tragically be lost to time. Zosha and the others are a fascinating characters? See, even the fact that you have to think of these singular people as multiple beings is so damn interesting. You've got Zosha, Larry, the DHL guy, the mayor of Albuquerque. All these various people that Carol meets throughout the show are all technically the exact same person. That's what makes them interesting, and that's what makes them terrifying. One of my favorite moments of the whole season is toward the end, after Carol and Zosha had been romantically involved for a little while. Carol started asking her more personal questions about Zosha, the original one. She started to get Zosha to refer to herself as I instead of we, and things seemed like they were becoming normal, or as normal as they could be. But their biological imperative never went away. Again, this is a necessity for them. They need to change the survivors. They need to change Carol. So this entire time when Carol thought things were beginning to feel normal again, we realized along with her that this was all manipulation. Whether on purpose or because of some biological reason, Zosha was doing everything Carol wanted, saying all the things she wanted to hear. There's a scene in the lodge where Carol finds out that the others already have a way of turning her, and Zosha tries to play it off as a good thing once again. She tells Carol that she will finally experience the purest form of bliss, and Carol says,
"If you loved me, you wouldn't do this. Please understand, we have to do this because we love you. Because I love you."
Now that is some manipulation right there. I could feel it seeping out of that comment. They're trying to make Carol feel safe and make her let her guard down, but they had no idea that they're dealing with a stubborn-ass Vince Gilligan character. Their drastically opposed views are going to clash in the future, and that is where the show gets all of its intrigue. The others represent the idea of unmitigated joy and what that might be like. But Carol Sturka represents the reality of that concept and shows that it's probably not all it's cracked up to be in the long run. Oh wait, this is supposed to be slow and boring though, my bad. I don't know why I'm even thinking so deeply about these things when there's supposed to be stuff happening. Where's the guns and explosions? Oh, there they are. Anyway, let's move on to the remaining characters because they aren't as important, but they still play vital roles in the story, especially one man in particular. Aside from Carol, there are 12 other survivors on Earth who have not been joined. They range in age, gender, and nationality, and Carol tried to make contact with the English speakers very soon after the initial event. However, she quickly found out that she is seemingly the only person who has an issue with this new world. The rest of the survivors were happily going about their lives with their families like nothing had happened. They all thought that Carol was acting very rash and thought she was a bit stubborn. I guess it's not just the IMDb reviewers, huh? One of these survivors seemed to not have any family members that were now also the entire world, so he took advantage of the other's kindness and asked for everything he ever wanted. Beautiful women, the town of Las Vegas as his playground, Air Force One as his private jet. Yes, Mr. Kumba Diabate is a very eccentric man who wants nothing but the best in this fresh new world that bends to his whim. Sure, he's using these women to satisfy him, but he is being courteous about it and is trying to form a connection with each one of them, even though they're technically all the same. Yeah, he's using even more people to act out his own personal James Bond adventures, but he is just having fun. It's not like he's mutilating or murdering them for entertainment. Mr. Diabate is a complicated individual. However, aside from these aspects of his character, we don't really learn too much about him. He's a man who is using the entire world's generosity to his benefit while trying to remain civil and caring. He even tries to work with Carol despite everyone actively avoiding her. He recognizes that she's lonely and wants to help everyone, even if she shows those feelings in a rough manner. Out of all the survivors, he is the one we get the most insight on, and I hope we get a lot more in the future because I'd personally like to know why he's doing all this. Does he really just want to live the high life and have his every dream realized? Or is he trying to make up for some previous life that he might have had before the joining? Was he a failed businessman who wanted to be like this but was constantly rejected by his fellow socialites? Was he a poor man who could only ever dream of this lifestyle and is now taking as many advantages as he can while he has the chance? I'm very interested to see his backstory and would obviously love some more information on the rest of the survivors as well. Aside from Lakshmi, whose only character traits are that she loves her family and hates Carol, we only really learn the rest of the survivors' names and not much else. However, that can't be said about the last survivor, who was actually hidden for some time and came out into the spotlight when he got one of Carol's messages about returning the world to its natural state. That man is Minusos, a South American man who, for the beginning of this event, treated things like a real apocalypse. He was holed up in this self-storage place, eating dog food and not going outside or interacting with the others whatsoever. And we learn that he's treating this whole thing as almost a paranormal event. At one point he mentions that they have stolen everyone's soul and says, if they can't be saved, then they are better off dead. He treats this whole event with even more overreactions than Carol. He leaves notes and money for people who he took things from, acting like they'll come back next week and be looking for compensation. He refuses to speak with the others because he thinks that they have invaded the earth and stolen everything that was already here. And in a way, yeah, he is kind of right. They have stolen the individuality from every person, as we've already discussed. But this entire situation is a little more complex, and slowly Minusos does begin to see that. He's the only character that has figured out something about this whole situation. He found out that some specific radio signal affects the others in some way, and it seems like it's either interrupting their connection or possibly breaking it. He's also a very rash person like Carol, but he is also very pragmatic and is trying to uncover the more scientific side of this connection. And since he and Carol are the only two people on the planet thinking in this way, he crosses half a continent to reach her and join up so they can set the world right again. Their interactions, while very brief and initially pretty problematic, are quickly shown to be incredibly important, and their partnership seems like it will be significant in the coming seasons. And while we get some information about Minusos, like his pragmatism, his honorable personality, and his rocky relationship with his mother, we still don't know too much about him either. However, we definitely know enough to come to the conclusion that Carol and Minusos are pretty much made for each other. They both have incredibly similar personalities, and that's both good and bad. They both want to do the right thing overall, but their ways of getting there differ wildly, at least at first. At the very end of the season, it seems like they're a little bit closer to being on the same page as they prepare to work together more in the next season. And I'd actually like to talk about a lot of my personal theories and hopes for the next season, but before I get to that, I would like to discuss some of the behind-the-scenes elements of Pluribus. Before writing the script for this video, I of course rewatched this first season, but I also chose to watch a lot of interviews and listen to the official podcast that has a lot of insight from the creators. I was hoping to find a lot of their own personal views on these characters and the story, and I got a lot of that. However, I also heard how much work went into making this series, and while a lot of stuff might seem really simple while you're watching it, there was an absurd amount of talent that went into just this single season. So I'd like to share what I learned and hopefully give you more of an appreciation for all the hard work on display here. Even if you still think this show is slow and boring and don't care about the story elements, hopefully you can find some appreciation in the filmmaking aspect. While Pluribus can be both a small and large show in terms of story and characters, it's almost always a large show in terms of scale. Because this is, once again, a show that involves the entire planet of Earth, naturally it would make sense that we see various parts of the world. If this show had the same premise but the entire plot took place in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that would naturally make it feel very fabricated. And they didn't even need to go to each foreign place for this production. They used some movie magic and made certain places look like other places, but we still get the feel of a globe-trotting tale. From New Mexico to Morocco, from Spain to Las Vegas, from Paraguay to an entire journey across South America. We get so many unique settings that make this feel like an actual worldwide event. It could certainly be interesting if this was a story that only took place in Albuquerque, because then you'd be wondering about the rest of the world and if it was affected. But because we know straight from the others that it is, it helps make this whole thing more believable if we can see the rest of this empty, blissful world. And the production team did an excellent job at keeping up that illusion. They said that a lot of the South American stuff was filmed in the Canary Islands, which are off the coast of Morocco and aren't really that big. But because of the team's skilled usage of the locations, they made these 7 islands feel like these South American countries that Manousos was passing through on his northern drive. And I'm sure if you live in South America or have been there, you might notice some places that obviously aren't there. These vastly differing locales, along with these Indiana Jones-esque map graphics, help make this feel like weeks of traveling across multiple countries. And this scene of Manousos' journey is actually a great segue for another spectacle that these creatives are always so good at. This montage across South America is one of many montages that take place in Pluribus, and it's sort of a Vince Gilligan staple at this point. Some of the best parts in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul for me are these montages. They often are scenes showing mundane or low-stakes events that may or may not involve something outlandish, like cooking meth or street walking. And these scenes are contrasted with some upbeat and energetic music, which typically gives you a really odd sensation. You're excited for the montage, which is visually and auditorily impressive and fun, but what you're actually seeing is typically really off-putting, either in a general criminal manner or because the character in the scene is doing something that's only gonna hurt them in some way. These are my absolute favorite moments of any Vince Gilligan show, and I'm happy that they are of course here again in Pluribus. The first big one we get comes in episode 3 when Carol tries to go to the supermarket and everything has been moved by the others. She likes the act of going to the store and probably wants to feel some kind of normalcy, so she asks them to put everything back in its place. Naturally, this would take a really long time with just 1 or 2 workers, but luckily they have millions of employees at their disposal. All these individuals are part of the hive mind and work perfectly in sync with one another. But in reality, this would probably be really difficult to coordinate for all these untrained actors. I'm sure that a lot of these real people probably haven't done any acting gigs where they had to act as a human conveyor belt. But since this is a Vince Gilligan production, he and the rest of the team made sure to make this short montage feel just as believable as the locations. Seeing the world affected by the others is important, but the most important element of the show by far is making sure that the audience believes that all these people are the exact same. And so they had to get specific choreographers to teach these people how to act in unison. They had to make sure all these trucks in this store were available for the scene. They had to make sure that these background actors could do their jobs the way they were supposed to. And they had to make sure that this all felt real. If they were all just walking around aimlessly, then you might think that this work was kind of phoned in. But that's not the case. They are all moving very surgically, moving in the exact way that members of a hive mind would be if they all had the exact same mental connection. Stuff like this is just so incredibly impressive to learn about, because when I was watching this for the first time, I could see that a lot of effort went into this, as well as something like the first episode. The creators said that these moments in the first episode where the joining is happening took around a week of shooting, and that's just for around 20 to 30 minutes of the episode. But most people can agree, even the slow and boring crowd, that this first episode feels the most real. This unfolding apocalypse feels like you're watching this happen in real time. You feel just as terrified and uncertain of what's happening as Carol does, and this all stems from the production. The work that everyone did in scenes like these is fully necessary to convey those feelings. And while these actors need to be on the same wavelength physically, they also need to stretch their acting muscles. These people are background actors, and they aren't always meant to be prominent in scenes, but they still need to be on top of their game because of the nature of the story. As was pointed out on the podcast, they aren't just walking across with a folder in an office. They are doing something that has a purpose. Cleaning up the destruction, walking around in the hospital trying to essentially heal themselves, catering to all these different individuals who want a familiar connection with their families, making this diner feel real again, and giving Carol a very specific gift that they can't just go get from a store. These things simply would not work at all if we had one or two background actors, or if they were slacking and just doing this for a paycheck. They have to be on their A game, just as much as someone like Carolina Vidra, or else this world no longer feels believable. They can't phone in this performance. They have to actually perform. And thankfully, this seemed to be made a lot easier for them thanks to the veterans of this team, who made this environment a very collaborative one. There were a lot of cast members talking on the podcast, but also a lot of the crew. Both groups of people talked about how the entire environment on these sets always felt collaborative and not like a place where you had to do every single thing the directors and producers said no matter what. Ray and Carolina talked about their respective first times on set and how refreshing it was to discuss character choices with writers and directors, but also with people in hair and makeup. They weren't just talking about the length of clothes or the color of things, but what meaning those elements actually had on the story and characters. Even the sets themselves became characters in some ways, specifically Carol's neighborhood, which the crew actually built from scratch. There were a variety of reasons for building this neighborhood, one of which definitely being that they didn't want any future owners of these houses to get surprise pizzas on the roof. But the biggest reason had to be the fact that a lot of the show takes place in this little corner of Albuquerque. Carol buries her wife in the backyard, runs through her own fence, had a grenade explode outside her window, has multiple drones pass through, lights fireworks that catch one of the other houses on fire, has a whole comedy routine with Manuzos. A lot of stuff happens here, and a lot of time went into making this feel like a real neighborhood. Denise Pizzini, the production designer, talked about how much specific detail the crew put into each one of these homes, and she said that even though they did all that work, it's ultimately a thankless job. Most people who watch the show aren't going to also listen to the podcast or know that they built this entire place from scratch, so they won't even consider how much planning went into making these buildings a reality. It's unfortunate that these crew members often get overlooked by general audiences, but if this dedication to the craft makes the show better, then I hope these silent heroes still feel proud of their work. And their work definitely elevates certain scenes, such as the one in episode 7 where Carol is shooting off fireworks and almost lets one hit her. Carol has been alone for over a month at this point, with no interaction aside from Howard Hamlin on the phone. She initially felt very content with her time alone, singing songs to herself and exploring the whole city and state. But as time went on, the loneliness started to sneak up on her and choke out the remaining life she had. At this point, she is back in her neighborhood, all alone, blaring loud music instead of singing it herself to drown out the pain inside. She's shooting off all these big fireworks to try and give herself some kind of emotion, but can't find the strength. She's so deep in her despair that she almost lets one take her out and end the suffering. This is one of the most powerful moments in the entire season for me, and it wouldn't have been possible without the collaboration on display in this show. Ray's boundless talent, the care and craftsmanship that went into making this neighborhood, the planning and logistics of the scene in terms of camera work and lighting, and all the other elements come together in this one scene to make it feel like a real event. If you've been following along, then you should hopefully be able to feel the tangible sorrow that this scene is steeped in. And none of that would be here if it weren't for the entire cast and crew's dedication. Also, this wasn't the only thing that was built from scratch to make this world feel more alive. Remember Air Force One from episode 2? Well, as you might have guessed, that's not the actual plane that belongs to the president. That was once again a set that had to be designed to fit this show and these scenes. And in other scenes, they even went as far as to let some of the actors do things that would prop up this illusion even more. Carolina learned how to taxi this C-130 aircraft along the tarmac to make us believe that this was an individual who had the entire aeronautic knowledge of the world in her head. Massive undertakings like these that only really provide small benefits to the story itself solidify how much talent there is among Vince Gilligan's crew. They have made some of the greatest television shows of all time, both in terms of story as well as from a filmmaking standpoint. And with Pluribus, we could see that they've only improved their crafts as time went on. They clearly do everything in their power to bring the vision of this world to life, and all it does is cement the show as a project of pure passion. And remember, this is only season 1. Imagine what they'll be doing in season 4 or 5. I believe that Pluribus is a legendary show in the making. It may be slow at times, but I feel like everything here in this first season is setting up much bigger and deeper moments. This is a season of development and growth, and I'm expecting it to only go further up from here, partially because that's exactly how Vince Gilligan's last 2 shows went. And that brings me to the final topic of this video. I'd like to discuss the legacy of Pluribus. How well does it hold up compared to Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul? And how well do I think it will continue to hold up in the future? I'd also like to discuss some of my personal theories and hopes for the next season or future seasons, because I've thought of a lot of cool things and I'm hoping the writers can meet my expectations, or the more likely thing, exceed them. Pluribus keeps up with the character development of the previous shows, and in some ways I'd say improves on it. Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul had a plethora of fantastically written characters. However, there are so many that they don't all get quite the same amount of attention. Walt and Jimmy, Jesse and Kim, Skyler and Howard, Hank and Mike, Gus and Lalo. These characters and many more are incredibly crafted and feel like real individuals. But at the same time, they don't all get equal treatment. The shows focus on Walt and Jimmy primarily, so naturally they are the most developed. And characters like Jesse and Kim get a whole lot of changes as well, but as you go down the list, the characters get less and less personal attention. The great thing about Pluribus from a creative and viewing standpoint is that there aren't that many characters. There are a total of 12 other survivors, one of which is now turned, and 9 of them barely get any recognition. There are some that we haven't even seen and only have their names and most basic information about them. So aside from them, we really only have Mr. Diabate, Manusos, Carol, and the others. Those 2 men don't get as developed but have a lot of room to grow. The others are complex but are technically all the exact same character. So if one of them changes, you can assume that all of them change in the exact same way. There are plenty of developments that can be made that will give the others more individuality, perhaps, but at the moment they don't need too much character development. So because of that, Carol is able to get about 80 or 90% of the attention, and that allows her to grow at an incredibly quicker rate than Walter White or Jimmy McGill. Those characters took seasons and seasons to get to certain points in their arcs. But since Carol has 3 episodes in the first season where she is primarily alone, we get to watch her grow and change and get to see exactly how she ticks in certain ways. Those slow and boring scenes may feel meaningless, but these are just ways of telling a wordless story. Visual media such as movies and television are not the same as other mediums. With video games, you get a multitude of ways that stories can be told, including directly through the player's own actions. Traditional print mediums like books need to spell out a lot of stuff for the reader and give the character's thoughts directly to the audience, because there is no other way to get them across. Comic books are similar, but they add illustrations, which can either reinforce thought bubbles, or they can directly show things through a character's facial expressions or their actions. And the places where visual human actions are so necessary are in films and television. These are visual mediums first and foremost. For the first 20 plus years of cinema, all we had were silent films. No dialogue, no exposition dumps about plot elements and characters' feelings, just visuals. You had to see what these characters were doing and how they were reacting to the events around them to understand the story. And if they were talented enough, you could easily deduce every feeling inside them just from the performances. Pluribus chooses to explain a lot of what happens because this is a sci-fi world. You have to set some ground rules or otherwise anything at all could happen, and that takes away from the drama. But those dramatic moments all stem from that initial knowledge and the way characters deal with it all. Mr. Diabate and the other survivors are shown to be content with how things are going, so they don't try to change much. Manusos is shown to be very opposed to everything that's going on. Those brief moments of him leaving money for people who may or may not be coming back is a visual way to express his feelings about wanting the old world back. And Carol deals with everything in a variety of ways. She acts rash, she acts smug and thinks she's better than the others. And then she becomes sad and has to deal with those feelings completely on her own. Rhea Seehorn said in a few different interviews that at times the story changes because the audience becomes her scene partner. For most of episodes 5, 6, and 7, she is completely alone. She has no one to act off of. She can't reflect any feelings off her scene partners like actors typically would. She only has the inner feelings and emotions of Carol Sturka to go off. So she uses her immense talent as an actress to show us what Carol is feeling. Not tell us, but show us. If Carol were to say, "Oh man, golly gee, I sure wish those others didn't leave me here all alone," that would feel so flat and unbelievable. But instead, she tells us through her actions. She faces loneliness with a chipper mood, singing songs, relaxing in hot springs, but ends with sheer depression and destructive tendencies. And we then see how much this affected her internally through her actions. When Zosha comes back, Carol grabs her and is literally holding on to her for dear life. This absence of connection affected her so deeply that she is afraid that Zosha will escape if she doesn't hold on as tight as she can. This is how you tell a good story. And this is how Vince Gilligan and company tell all their stories. And I think this comes across a lot sooner in Pluribus. Walt and Jimmy were always hiding their feelings, and we could see that as well, but Carol wears her emotions on her sleeve. She hides them for a bit, but because of the way her character was made, she has to get them out in some way, whether it's positive or negative. Because of this, I hope to see Carol ebb and flow throughout the rest of the series. I feel like she could have a much more interesting character arc compared to Walt or Jimmy, who had fascinating journeys, but ultimately understandable ones. I feel like Carol could find peace and love by the end of this story, or maybe she just learns to live with the pain in better ways and remains the same character she was at the start. Overall, I personally think this is a phenomenal show, and I'm so happy that it's even on. It's been almost 4 years since Better Call Saul ended, and it really hasn't been the same without a Vince Gilligan show. I'm also really happy to be watching this one live, finally. I started Breaking Bad during the break between the first and second half of the last season, so that's the only part I watched live. I watched the first episode of Better Call Saul when it premiered, but at the time I wasn't immediately invested, so I had some of that slow and boring mentality and didn't watch the show for a while. I think I started watching it live with season 5, so I watched those last 2 seasons in real time. Thankfully, I'm here from the very start with Pluribus, and I'm very happy about that. It's fun to be able to theorize and think about anything that might come next. It does suck to have to wait a real long time, but thankfully my theories will help hold me over. One thing that definitely has me hooked is the final scene of the season. Subtly hinting at the atom bomb in episode 4, then having Carol actually ask for it at the end was not something I was expecting. But I'm glad that the writers are smarter than me, because I was very pleasantly surprised. I also immediately thought about something that I've heard Vince say a few times. In Breaking Bad, when they foreshadow the M60 at the beginning of season 5, he mentioned that he couldn't put the gun there and not use it by the end of the series. So if he's still working with that line of thinking, then we will absolutely see Carol Sturka use a nuke at some point. I could personally see it being used in a number of ways. It could simply be a defensive thing, like I've heard some other people say. Perhaps Carol is just using it to deter the others from coming to mess up whatever her and Manusos will be doing. On my rewatch, I remembered that there's another big target that Carol could be looking toward in the future. In episode 8, during this observatory scene, Zosha mentions that they're building a giant antenna somewhere in hopes of sending a similar message to the one that caused the joining out into space. Carol could very easily blow that up and halt their plans, or maybe just find where it is and threaten to blow it up as some kind of leverage. No matter what she might use it on, I'm very interested to see if Vince still has that philosophy of, we showed it, so we gotta use it. I'm also intrigued on what Carol and Manusos will be doing exactly to try to free the world's inhabitants. I'm assuming that the radio transmission that he's uncovered has some big importance to whatever they do. I'm also looking forward to seeing how they will try and save the others. Will it be some massive thing, or will it be more personal? I came up with that idea based on something said in this interview where they asked the question, will love like Carol or violence like Manousos be a cure for the others? This got me thinking. Carol was seemingly trying to bring Zosha back by asking her to use I instead of we, and trying to learn more about the original Zosha. We saw that that wasn't really working, but perhaps there could be a way to kind of open her up to that more. Maybe she could be swayed more with those small little things if she was in that same state that Rick was under around Manousos. And in that scene, Manousos seemed to be making some progress with Rick by shouting directly in his face and overloading his emotions. I think it'd be really interesting if one of those avenues worked, or maybe even both of them did. Saving the others with multiple methods sounds a lot more fascinating, and it could add some more drama instead of some big machine or something saving them all at once. Perhaps shouting at them to free them could work, but they might be discombobulated, or maybe some of their memories would be lost. And on the flip side, maybe being gentle with them would make them come back like nothing happened. With either of those avenues, they will still need to be freed directly, one-on-one, or in small groups. I think that could be cool to see, because then Carol and Manousos would have to take their time and free people at a much slower rate than they probably want to. That could also lead to the others becoming potentially hostile, or at least defensive. They could maybe start blocking themselves off and doing things that would slow Carol and Manousos down. We see that they're capable of protecting themselves, since they left Carol and said that the whole joining happened because they were discovered by the military and had to speed things up to defend themselves. Regardless of any of this happening, all I truly want to see is if they can save the others, and if they will save Zosha. Deep in my Stersha-loving heart, I really want to see Carol and Zosha have their happily ever after. So I hope they can find a way to free her and they can get back to where they left off. However, I realize that in reality, something like that probably won't happen, because it'd be too good to be true. So if I'm thinking with my dramatic mind, I think it'd be really great if Carol could save Zosha and feel like everything is fine. But then Zosha doesn't even remember her at all, and those feelings are now one-sided. I think that could then go one of two ways. Carol slowly rebuilds her relationship with Zosha, and they eventually do get a happily ever after. Or the second path, which I could unfortunately see happening, is that Carol saves Zosha, she still loves her, but Zosha doesn't remember anything and doesn't feel the same way. Maybe she's straight, or she just doesn't like Carol, and those feelings will never be reciprocated. That would be so heartbreaking, but it would also be some real juicy drama. And Vince's shows are known for those kinds of outcomes. I'm also particularly interested to see if two other fan theories will have any relevance. When Manousos is heading to New Mexico, he's trying to learn English through audio tapes, and one of the phrases says, "The girl saves the mouse from the trap." This sounds like an insignificant phrase at first, but I saw a few people latch onto it and think it has some deeper meaning, and I could definitely see that being the case. Maybe the mouse is Carol, and she's going to get successfully manipulated into almost getting turned, but Zosha snaps out of her connection, saves her. Or maybe Zosha is the mouse, and Carol does end up saving her from the hive mind. And another moment that I've seen people latch onto in particular was this moment in episode 4. When Carol tries to drug Zosha to get information and the others all get her to stop, they form a circle around Zosha in this shot that looks a bit like a key. I've seen some fans take this shot and roll with the idea that Zosha is the key. This isn't something that's directly from the show, like the mouse in the trap concept, but this is certainly an intriguing thing to consider. Will Zosha ultimately be the one who gives Carol the means to break the other's connection? Could she simply just give her some very important information? Is she the key to Carol's heart? Whatever it might be, I personally like this idea that people have started running with, and I hope it does turn out to be something relevant instead of just being a cool shot. That's a good amount of theories, and I would love it if some of them came to be true. However, as with all Vince Gilligan projects, I'm just along for the ride. Rhea Seehorn said it best herself.
As any of us have seen when you see his shows, if you just trust to get in the car and go on the trip with him, it's going to be a great ride. Even when you're totally like, what's happening, what's going on? He just really takes people on a journey as a storyteller.
And speaking of, it's so great that she's finally getting the recognition she deserves on a wider scale. Pluribus is now the most streamed series of all time on Apple. She was nominated countless times for her performance as Kim, but never won a single major award. Not even for this, man. Seriously. Thankfully, the award committees finally woke up and gave her a Critics' Choice Award as well as a Golden Globe, and I feel very confident that those won't be the last things she wins. I'm so very excited to see where Pluribus will go in the future in all kinds of ways, and I hope I was able to convey to you why this show is so special. And to touch on the slow and boring accusations for the last time, I originally was gonna just talk shit about all the people that made reviews like that. I made the title of this video what I did because I believe it. Some people really just must have been watching this show with their eyes closed. It's gray and dull. What drugs was this person taking? Did they do the heroin that Carol asked for? And while I think those reviews are very silly and probably shouldn't be taken super seriously, it's still perfectly okay if you don't enjoy the show. If you actually find it slow and boring and just don't like it, don't care to watch more, then that's perfectly understandable. Vince himself helped me to see that not everyone has to think the same way I do about this show.
We don't need all of the audience. There are you guys, God bless you guys for digging what we do. God bless the folks listening. I assume they're fans too. But there's a whole world of people like, this show sucks. This show, all she does is wander around and shit. But I mean, it's a small world. That is as it should be. That's not a bad thing. If the audience was monolithic, the world would be the others.
If everyone felt the exact same way I do about the show, then it wouldn't be as interesting as it is. It means a lot more to me personally, and to other people, maybe even you, it feels like just another sci-fi thing. So if you truly think this show is slow and boring and just don't gel with it, I respect that. Just please don't go around spouting that it's bad like some of these people in reviews. There's a massive difference between something being bad and just personally not liking it. I personally don't really care for stuff like The Last of Us, Kill Bill, Ghost in the Shell. All those things are really good and are well made and connect very deeply with some people. I'm just not one of those people, and that's okay. So if Pluribus still doesn't connect with you and you made it this far in the video, I hope I was at least able to help you see why some of us think it's so special. And I hope you give it another shot in the future, because if this is like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, there will absolutely be some unforgettable payoffs. That's all I got for now. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on Pluribus, and I'd love to hear what you think of it as well. Feel free to comment any of your thoughts, positive or negative, down below. I'd be happy to chat and see some differing viewpoints. Although if you say something like, nah, this show sucks, then I'm just gonna move on. If you enjoyed my video, please leave a like and maybe check out some of my other content. Maybe like my last video where I talked about Star Wars Visions, an animated anthology series that has some of the most unique Star Wars stories I've ever seen. I feel like that video is a lot more introspective and personal like this one was, so if you want more of that, that might be a good place to start. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts on TV, movies, or whatever else I feel like discussing, please subscribe for more. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you around. Excuse me, is this working by the way? Yeah, okay. However, that can't be said about the last survivor. I bit my tongue. Oh my god, my ass hurts. Oh Jesus. Oh my god. Okay. 26, alright, I'm gonna stop these recordings now. Take a break, because I'm dying. Okay. Microphone. Hello. Microphone. Okay, here we go. Alright, here we go. And how refreshing it was to discuss character choices with writers and directors. Oh my god. Fuck me. Gross. I'm throwing up. There were a variety of reasons. God damn it. But if this dedication to the craft makes the show... What the hell was that? God damn it. Fucking back is killing me. So if he's still working with that line of thinking... Jesus Christ. My ass. I've been recording for like, I don't know, 80 minutes or something. Oh god. Oh, Jesus. Pain. I'm gonna do this really quick and then I'm gonna stop because pain. And that will be it. Oh my god, that was like 100 minutes, I think. Fuck me. That's it. I take a bow. Take a adieu, whatever. Not take a do. I bid you adieu. You know what I mean? Okay, bye. See ya. Bye-bye.